So I didn't want to be that guy that screwed that one up. But my name is Jesse Darcy. I am the 5 through 12 math and business coordinator at Regional School District 10 in Connecticut, not far from ESPN headquarters, if you're familiar with any of that area. So really, this journey that we've been on over the last 5 or 6 years for trying to grow computer science has been a really rewarding experience. And, I'm looking at some of the early survey results here. It looks like we have a lot of high school people here, a couple middle school. Looks like it's pretty much everyone is currently teaching yourself. So that's great. And that's kind of where it started for me. I was at the middle school in district. A position opened up at the high school, which included one lonely computer science course, which the year I took over, or the year prior to me moving up, we had 6 students. So it was something that we had, great, that's a starting point, but it was also something that, as we all know, it's growing, it is there, it is going to be an essential skill, and just something that every kid should be exposed to. So really just a little bit about our district. We serve 2 towns. We're about 2,200 total students, so we're fairly small. The high school's about 700. We've been shrinking a little bit over the last couple of years. Middle school's a little larger. We have some students go to private and such. Our elementary schools are about 400 apiece. In terms of just general computing skills, they start in elementary school, with typing and trying to do the word processing. And we are actually undergoing some change in terms of aligning as a district to the ISTE standards and, pinpointing exactly what grade level is going to be responsible for what computational skills that students need to be successful, in the 21st century. In middle school, we have what we call UA classes, our Unified Arts, and really every grade has some kind of experience for a quarter. We are quarter based in the middle school. So in 5th grade, we are doing coding, basic typing, basic use of SketchUp. 6th grade, we have a tech ed course, which does include some coding, 3D printing, things like that. 7th grade again. So we've worked over the years to try to implement coding into each area. This way we start to have a feeder program into our high school. So how it started and how it's going right now. This is one of those memes that I've kind of seen circulating the internet lately. So really for us, this has been our growth over time since the year that before I took over to where we currently are now. As you can see, there's a couple highlighted sections there. 2015-16 is when I moved up and had that one course. And then in 16, 17, 17, 18, that was when I was really starting to be like, all right, it looked like the numbers were starting to increase. We need to try and really make this a push and see what we can do to really drive this home. And then as you can see, we really kind of, have gotten in a really good place over the last 3 or 4 years, and next year included. I still remember though, when that first year, it's always that nerve-wracking thing. I mean, I took computer science in college as a math major. It's kind of those 2 courses that you had to take, or at least I had to take, and it really didn't come naturally to me. It was difficult. My teacher just wasn't approachable. Just it didn't connect with me. On top of the fact that the computer rooms and stuff, and the computers just barely work themselves. So it was like kind of do this by hand, which is defeating the purpose of computer programming. But as you can see, we've kind of made a good push. So in 2014-15, what it looked like is we had the one course. It was a fully Java, not the AP CSA, but just a Java course. And there were 6 students. So that represented under 1% of our student population for that year. And there was only one teacher able to teach it, which was of concern as well. Fast forward to this year, we now have 2 sections of an introductory course, which is a half-year course. So for a teacher, it is a prep in the fall and a prep in the spring. We have 2 sections of AP Computer Science Principles, which is what I teach. And then we have a number of students that are taking AP CSA through Virtual High School. If you're not familiar with that, that's just an online platform delivered by a virtual teacher somewhere in the abyss. And we have had textbooks that align with this, so our students have access in that sense. And our intro course is based in Python. The AP CSP we use is JavaScript, and obviously the CSA is in Java. So we have a variety of languages that the students are going to get exposed to, as they progress through school. As you can see the total students and stuff like that. And we're at the point where now we have over 10% of our population taking it. And what's interesting is, some of you might have noticed, like, we've declined by 100 kids in that span, but we've increased substantially in the number of kids that have taken it. Which I think is really a huge win. And at the bottom there, now we have 4 teachers out of the 9 in the math department that are able to teach, or have taught, or are willing or are able to teach really any one of these courses, which has been really important. Next year, we're still in the planning phases of doing it, but our numbers look to be just as strong. We have currently, as of last week, 73 signed up. And that doesn't include any of the CSA kids. So I know a good 5, maybe 10 kids of our current CSP group are willing to jump in and looking for opportunities. And I hope this gets to the point where it kind of forces the hand of the school and the district to finally offer a CSA class in person. But there's a lot of logistical pieces that have to come with that as well. So the need to rebuild, like, how did this come up? Because we had that one course, it was okay. I still remember when the first day I came, I was kind of like, I don't really know where to start with this. The teacher had retired. I don't know where to go. And then I had this one student, Jillian, come to me on the first day. She's like, I'm here to help. I'm like, say what? Like, really? And she's like, yeah. And she was an outstanding student. She was like a co-teacher in that class. It was ridiculous. And she ended up going to major in computer science as well. But that was really, really important. But when I talked to her, and when I started realizing after the first 2 years, is that students had a perception of this being like really, really difficult. And it would really not encourage anyone to take the course. Why would I go jump in to this really, really hard course? On top of the fact that it was a full year course. And a lot of times with these students, they would push this off. This would be like a junior and senior heavy class. And full year courses are really hard to fit in when you're at that point of your career. Plus, I don't know how all your schools operate, but our seniors can have privileges where if they don't have like a first period or last period, they're allowed to either come late or leave early from school. So like, why would I not do that? So that was a little bit of a battle. So for me, I was like, all right, how can we maybe make this a little more manageable to people? The course tools of what we were using were very clunky. I mean, I love Dropbox. I still use it to this day, but that was kind of the system that was put in place for sharing the files back and forth so I can see what the students are submitting. And it wasn't, there was a learning curve of like a couple of weeks just to get that up and running. And then you had all the other stuff that we were working on. So it wasn't great in that sense. We had limited access. The prerequisite was like Algebra 2 honors. Very few kids are getting to that point in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we're very fortunate where we have a number of kids that do have that ability and that have reached that point. But for me, as a teacher, and one of my philosophies is like, I need access points to curriculum. When I say that we want all students to be able to do something, I mean all. I don't just mean, a select group. And I think that we were kind of limiting ourselves in terms of who could even access that course. And the last thing, it was like, it wasn't even recommended. Like, it wasn't on people's radar to even recommend kids for this. It was just like, oh, it was in the program of studies. If you happen to see it and found it was interesting, like, go ahead and take it. So there was some branding involved that we really had to make an effort to push. And from the math department and the science department and the counselors, and kind of getting everyone on board and be like, you should try this. And again, to all of our students, to the kids that maybe found math easy, or to the kids that maybe found math difficult. We wanted to make sure that we were reaching out to the young women in our school to make sure that they understood that this wasn't just a guy thing to do, which I know at times it can seem. We wanted to make sure we were reaching out to our students of color, and really making sure that as many barriers were destroyed as possible in allowing access. Along with the branding, you might see on my shirt here, if I kind of, so Yeah, this is not really a sales pitch for CodeHS, but this is one of the things that, last year's AP class decided to do. You can't really tell, but there's all the student names that make this up. It's like a Wordle. And then they made a function at the bottom, do backflip, that the class voted on. But it was like something like this that, the kids will wear at random times throughout the year. And it helps kind of let others know, like, oh, they're in this class. Like, that's interesting. Maybe this is something that I can do too.
Jesse, we did have a question.
Yeah,
when you have CS, is it an elective or does it count as a math or science class?
So it's a math elective. Yeah, so it counts as a credit. Connecticut standards are starting with this year's sophomore class. We have changed the credit that are needed. We can go like 9 STEM, 9 humanities, and you have to kind of fill in the rest with 25 total credits before you graduate. But this counts as a math credit, but it's considered an elective as well. Who paid for the t-shirts? The kids did. Who did you reach out? Well, I'm sorry, how did you reach out to Black students and girls? So again, I had teachers really take charge and identify students that they felt like, their thought process and their effort and, really just their feel, because I, as the math coordinator, I did not know all the students personally until they get to my class. So really, I kind of relied on the teachers, and we understood, and everyone had the same message and ideas of why we want to push this. So really, it was reliant on the connections and the relationships that our teachers have built with our students. So going back, so what we ended up doing is creating that half-year introductory course. And the first year that we did this, I did the intro course as a JavaScript course. Again, my long-term vision was I need a feeder program to get to the AP, because we had still not had the AP yet. So my idea was like, if I can get maybe a couple sections of this up and running, maybe that'll build a foundation of 25, 30 kids that would then take AP and then kind of start building a pathway. And this course had no prerequisites. And I think that was really important because it showed freshmen or sophomores that, hey, I could take this course, not just the juniors and seniors. And we did have a good mix of students. We found a viable platform, CodeHS. Right? It seemed to work better, and it's only gotten better since that day. Administrative support and funding. Now, as I'm looking through this, there's one admin that filled out that form, but a lot of it are teachers. So, this is just something that I think there's pretty easy convincing that goes on to say that, hey, this is something that we need and we should grow. Obviously, funding is tricky. I will admit that to get this off the ground, we did rely on grants, but we also want to be cognizant of that because grants tend to have a cliff, right? We don't want to get to the point where we're reliant on this, and the only way we could do is with this grant. So it's really important that we kind of establish the need, and once you show that, hey, look at the increase in students that are interested, then it's a lot easier to kind of squeeze that into the budget because this is something that kids want and need. We worked on a feeder program. So as I mentioned earlier, we started working with the middle school and seeing how can we introduce some things down at the middle school. Again, this way, the first time that they access this stuff and they see this stuff is not in 9th or 10th grade. They're seeing it and maybe getting a little bit of inspiration down at our middle school. So generating interest. And this kind of goes into my teaching philosophies a little bit. Don't make the course impossible, right? Make it easy. It's okay. The word of mouth has been by far the biggest response I get from students on why they take this course. I do not pretend to be like the gatekeeper to the next chapter of their life. And I want to make this course as fun as possible. My line every year to my AP kids is like, this is an AP class that will not feel like an AP class. Like, that's my goal, is to make it feel like it's, like any other course in the sense of difficulty, and just make it approachable. Like I said before, getting your teachers to actually recommend it, that was huge. Some kids don't even know that it's an option, just getting that word out. The hour of code activities. This is something that I really made an effort to connect with, where every year my high school kids would go down to our elementary or our middle school and work with them, specifically in 7th and 8th grade, because these are the kids that are going to be coming up, the following year or two. And we would run through the hour of code. Simultaneously, it did a solid for our teachers because, I ran it, and it gave those teachers kind of like a full plan day, which was like, what? Like, that's unheard of. It was kind of like, stay in the library with me, but I'll run through, and my students will run through, my high school students will run through the activities with your kids. And it was a really positive experience. Again, it was one of those things where the kids were aware of, but it's just, you got to make it front and center if you intend to grow. But some of the difficulties we did have, as I mentioned, they didn't have room in their schedule. They didn't really know if they were going to enjoy it. And generally speaking, kids have no idea what it's about. It's not something that was normed at that time. So the other problem was, if more students take it, you might need some more teachers to teach it. And it's not something that, computer scientists, if you know it, you're probably going into some other 6-figure non-teaching job, right? And how are you going to lure teachers to to this profession where, it's definitely not as lucrative, but there are plenty of people that have taken computer science courses. Some of my science teachers have, and AP CSP specifically is such an approachable course where I really feel like, even like any teacher could really access it. It's just like learning a language.
Jesse, we actually have a question that applies to that. I'm going to go ahead. And so from Rochelle asking about if you have another department wanting to teach it. So like the science department, for example.
So it hasn't come up. And there's some constraints in terms of like the courses we offer. We are relatively small, which makes it difficult in terms of, how we can kind of squeeze these things together. Business department has a pretty full plate. We've also made personal finance a graduation requirement. So that is a significant, taker there. I saw that was one of the other questions too. So at the current moment, yeah, it's really just myself and, the 3 other math teachers that are, or would possibly teach it.
Michelle, feel free to chime in if I got the question right.
Yes, so that was my question, because initially the science department wanted to teach it, but I was already going for the training, which they didn't know because there really hadn't been any communication amongst us departments. So it was kind of between me and the science department. And then, like you said, sometimes math departments also offer it. So I was just wondering how you handle that when there's different departments fighting because, we need to get a teacher 2 more classes to keep them full time. So we want them to teach this class. I was just wondering how you were handling that.
Yeah, so it kind of just has always, I guess we've gotten lucky in that sense, right? It's always kind of fallen into the math department's kind of domain. I mean, we did have a web design course that was running at a time, and actually our one of our arts teachers actually taught that because it was like a side thing that they liked, and so I don't know how, your states individually operate, but we are allowed to teach outside of our content area, I think like at least 1 course, right? So you can be have the business cert, but teach a math course, if you had the appropriate background. So that's definitely something you'd want to look at to see, if it's the case where, you have a science teacher who wants to do it and a business, like, okay, how about you both do it? Because now you even have more reach in terms of, the kids that, you're hearing it from the business teachers, but you're also hearing it from the science teachers. And a lot of it has to do with the personality of the teachers and the people in front of those kids too, that drives them to take the course. Alrighty. So recruiting teachers, a lot of times you just have to ask. It's one of those things where for my math department, I was the only one teaching it for a while. And then I was kind of like, hey, we had one teacher, Nicole. I was like, hey, Nicole, like, I want to make this intro course, and I also want to recruit more girls to take it. Would you be interested? And she was like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll go for it. I was like, and I kind of hyped up CodeHS, and really the platform makes it easy for teachers to get into it. I think that's a huge sell. Any of the teachers that kind of had reservations, I'm like, listen, like, This isn't like another course. Like a lot of the stuff's already built for you, and a lot of it's self-driven by the students. And like when they're like, all right, this isn't going to be as hard as like picking up that AP Calc class over there. Like, yeah, I'll try it. I'll try that out. There are plenty of teachers, in different content areas that can, have taken a computer science and are interested in that. But again, it's kind of like, where does it fall? But maybe you can convince that if there's a need, you kind of go, to other departments as well. Yeah, so I just saw that. There's definitely some states that are starting to make it a mandate that you have that certification, which obviously is limiting. Connecticut's not there yet, luckily. Yeah, and I'm sure that exam is not easy, unfortunately. Finding an intuitive program, we said that, and taught to admin. I think the biggest thing that you could try to get is curriculum hours for those teachers as well, right? No one wants to go in unprepared. So trying to factor that in November, October, November, December, when the budgets are being built, that's going to be huge because, you really don't want to spring this on, like you spend hours convincing a teacher maybe to take it, and then you give them 0 hours over the summer to work on it. That's a hard sell. Try to get them the curriculum hours, try to get them, maybe if it's possible, to get them paid a little bit to get on board. Definitely makes the process a little bit easier. So our AP success. So obviously this is only year 3 that we've done it, but year 1 we had an 82% pass rate, right? And we had over 50% get a 4 or 5, which is really like my goal. Like I'm trying to get 82% at a 4 or 5 with 100% pass rate. Because a lot of colleges are, the 4 or 5 is where they're starting to get that credit. And with this course, if you're not familiar, it really kind of tends to be like a humanities credit in a sense, in a lot of colleges. But it's starting to change. So we had no 1s, and this is really with almost all kids having no prior background. So if any of you are out there like, what is maybe a good course, like this one's the course, and yeah, those 6 kids took the intro and all 6 got a 4 or 5 there. But our AP course, we opened it up to 10th graders and above, mainly because there's no AP that a 9th grader is taking. I just wasn't at that point. I know it just kind of goes against my whole access thing before, but I don't know. Freshmen are still figuring out high school, right? So to throw an AP at them at that point, it's a little difficult. So really our only prerequisite is that you have to be past Algebra 1 to take it, which, some of our 9th graders are there, but all of our 10th graders basically are there. So it really allows that. And that's for the AP. Our intro one has no prerequisites. So there's an option there. And then in year 2 last year, which was, the start of this craziness, the no multiple choice, I think that was interesting. So my pass rate went down. That kind of disappointed me a little bit. But the 4s and 5s stayed pretty consistent. Yeah, and I think that was, I'm sure there's a number of factors there. It's kind of hard to really dig into it, but we were really still proud of our pass rate, still above global average. Our 4s and 5s were still well above the global average and the state average. And again, most kids did not ever take a computer science course prior. So is this a good sell for students that are on that cusp or on that fence of like, yeah, should I take this? It's like, yes, you should. The downside is that we've grown to a point where we're actually kind of stealing from AP Stats and AP Calc. Because kids are like, well, why would I take those when I could take this? Like, and so it's been a little tricky there, but at the end of the day, like they're challenging themselves. They're getting a 21st century skill. Many of them have already gotten all the math they're going to need. Even as the math coordinator, I am cognizant that most of the math that they're learning in high school is not really something they're going to be using every day. I don't know how many of you are on the West Coast, maybe California, where that data science is taking over instead of Algebra 2, right? Like, I would love that. Like, we're actually in the process of the math department to realign our offerings, and so a bunch of students actually just pitched in for the Civics Action Project of rearranging the math pathway to include more computer science and to include more data science. And it was kind of funny, a little story here. They were presenting and our superintendent was in attendance, and they were like, 83% of students say that this is something that we need to do. And he's like, yeah, but how many students did you actually survey? And they're like 50. He's like, so do you think that is representative? And then one kid, really, really bright kid, he's like, but that's the reason why we need data science, because no one understands that there weren't enough survey results to actually do it. So, and he was like, touche, like, like great answer to that question. And he knew that like the participants weren't a, significant number. But it was what they had, it was like trying to get as many of your friends to take the survey. It's a struggle sometimes. But that was fun. So the student voice piece. I asked our students to kind of give me some input, told them that we were coming to CarelCon. And so over 85% of our kids historically have never taken a formal class. So there are a significant number that maybe the hour of code has inspired them and they've kind of done stuff on their own on Khan Academy or something else. But of those surveyed, and there was, again, insignificant out of my total group here, but I had 35 students respond. All of them said, even if they've never taken it, that they would recommend it, highly recommend it to another student that was maybe considering taking the course. And the likelihood that they would recommend it was a 3.88 out of a 4, 1 to 4 kind of scale that I gave them. Their opinion of the expected difficulty, as I said earlier, was like there was this perception of like this is an impossible course, right? So this was okay, a little harder than not. I don't like surveys that have the neutral, so I always tend to do an even numbered survey because I don't want everyone to just be like, I'm in the middle of everything. Like, no, you're going to pick a side here in some way, shape, or form. And then I asked them like, all right, after the course, how was it? How was it? And as you notice, like it dropped. Like they found it fairly manageable. After their experience there. Some of the questions, and I took a couple quotes, and yes, I did cherry pick some of these, but what were some of the concerns taking this? So this is from our students, right? So I didn't know much going in. It's my first AP course. We have a lot of kids that are, 10th graders taking this course, and that's really their first opportunity to take an AP course. So there's a little bit of hesitancy when you do that. I'm not good with technology, and I felt like I'd be behind others. Now this student's getting an A. The other student has got a 5 on 2 years ago. That said that. I had no background in coding, was worried about catching up with others, kind of similar vein there. Starting something completely new that I knew nothing about, a little scary. Got an A, did fine. Not sure if I'd be able to keep up. And that was like the overwhelming kind of theme through all the students is like, they just don't know. Right. So that's where that word of mouth becomes super important is that, when they ask their friends, hey, has this course that they're like, oh, it wasn't so bad. The teacher made it really enjoyable and it wasn't impossible. It was very, it worked for me. And so that's your biggest selling point, I think, for trying to get this to go. And yeah, Julia, I just saw that. It's definitely a challenge. So I will admit that I didn't consider the fact that getting certified would be part of that. So again, maybe if you can convince administration to throw some money into it in some way, shape, or form, maybe that helps that certification.
And Jesse, we did have a question from Mark as well. Did you get pushback from other departments like math and science if you're bringing kids over?
No, I didn't. I mean, my old math teachers, I don't think would have called me out on it, but I think we're cognizant of the fact that it did pull. But we've also noticed like our AP stats, we just had a teacher take over that after we had a retirement. And that actually went up from this year to next year. We like doubled the number of students taking that as well. So, yeah, I think we're stealing from AP Calc more than anything, to be honest, because I think kids are seeing that stats is a really applicable skill in the real world as well, right? And whereas AP Calc, unless you're going into something that's very STEM heavy, maybe I would take CSP instead of that or AP Stats. But no, we haven't really caught any grief from it. Science, I haven't really done an analysis of if we're pulling from them or not, I'll be honest. So I would not necessarily be aware of that. Anyway, so why did you decide to take the course? It was recommended by a teacher, sounded pretty cool. Teacher recommended it. I heard it was a lot of fun. Heard other students say it was an easy AP. Like, I'll admit, yeah, I do make it fairly easy. Again, like, our pass rate is pretty solid in my opinion, and I don't bury these kids with work. Basically, if you're keeping up with what we're doing in class, you're never going to have to do something outside of class. There is very little homework that we have them do, and really the only time that they ever do is if they're kind of slacking a little bit. I heard it was an easier AP. Sounded easier, more interesting than AP Calc. So there you go. There's the quote from the kid. I found coding interesting and knew it was a skill in today's workforce. I wanted to double up in math, heard it was fun and interesting. So yeah, we've had students that kind of run the gamut there. But I would say quite a number of them say that they found it easy, which I'm okay with. Again, it's more about getting the experience of the course and computer science in general for me. I'm not trying to pretend like, this is going to be what, either gets them to or does not get them to college or the workforce. It's just about getting as many kids to take it as possible and getting that experience. And the next question was the last question, I think. What would you say to a student who might be on the fence, even if you don't see yourself going into computer science? This class is a great way to build problem-solving skills while having fun to do it, right? I'm looking at that survey, and one of the question on it was like, what is the skill, trait that you want kids to have? So many people wrote critical thinking, problem-solving, things like that. So our kids are recognizing that this is something that they are building, right? You learn a lot, not just for CS, problem solving, be creative, work through difficulties, perseverance right there. Like this course literally teaches you all the things that we want, or computer science in general teaches our kids all the things that we really want to see in them. Little side story, I did have one of my first years, a student in Algebra 2, Level 2, which is, our college prep, I guess, if you will. And then also in it was the intro to computer science course at that point. So I had him currently in both. Student struggled, she was struggling in Algebra 2. Computer science, she actually was like misplaced. Like, however it happened, it was like, I don't know why this is in my schedule, but I just came and figured I'd see. So it was like, okay, well, welcome. Let's figure this out. And like after like a week, she's like, yeah, this seems cool, because I don't know if any of you use CodeHS, the Karel activities are very manageable in the beginning. It's definitely a low floor, and then you end up with a high ceiling kind of at the end, which is really designed for every lesson or course, what you were looking for. So she got hooked. And what I noticed was in math, a lot of times initially, she gets something wrong, shuts down. But in computer science, it was like, no, I know there's a solution. I know there's a way to do this, and I got to kind of figure it out. And as the year kind of progressed, I saw her change her habits in our math class, right? I saw that she was starting to look at errors she was making in a different way and trying to figure out, like, I know there's a solution to this, and what is it? So I do think that these skills kind of transcend computer science and leak into other areas. Again, I feel like if I had a magic wand, I would make a full year course at the middle school, because if we could teach those kids before high school, all these perseverance, problem solving skills, that would be wonderful. So again, that was part of our full process, was to see how we can squeeze this into middle school as best as possible. So, I had a couple more. It's not as bad as you would think. CS is a growing field. It's fun. I'm not a math person, which was scary, but I generally found it interesting. And I thought this last one was really interesting. Most everyone is starting from scratch. So if you find that you were never like the top of the class student, you might find this is something you're really good at, or something you'll really enjoy. And that was really genuine. And that student I have currently, and she's killing it. Like, she's doing absolutely phenomenal. Kind of came to me early on. I think her father does some stuff in cybersecurity. She's like, do you have any cybersecurity stuff? And, I was like, there's a little bit in this, but there's also this other course on CodeHS that I could just drop you in, and you can kind of do it on your own. And there's some online activities that she did. And she's really done a phenomenal job this year. It's been really fun to see. Looking at some questions real quick. Have you ever done anything cross-curricular to get students interested? No, but it's on like the bucket list of things to do. There are a couple components of how do you bring this into your math courses. I mean, cross-curricular, no, I did talk to the physics teacher. He was kind of amped up to see if we can kind of find a way to work together in that, which just doesn't happen, over the last 2 years. But I've had students that have gone to his course and have made programs to help them do stuff. So the kids have naturally found avenues to kind of incorporate some of the skills they've learned prior into their other courses. I'm trying to look at some of the other questions here. So to kind of, we get it up and running, right? You're 2-3 years from now, we have a couple more courses. How do you kind of sustain it? Again, I think, and this goes back to my teaching philosophy, building relationships first. So whether you're the teacher or you are in charge of the other teachers or whatever it might be, this is just a general rule of education, right? If there's no relationship, there's not going to be a lot of learning happening. So work on building that relationship. Again, going back, word of mouth is going to be your biggest thing. If the kids are saying like, no, that teacher's awesome, and they're really approachable and easy to work with, like that's going to be a huge selling point. Make it accessible. Take away those barriers that exist. Make it feel different than a normal course. And this one's a big one for me. So I really make an effort to make this feel unlike any other experience that these kids have had. And the way that I've been able to do that is by giving them autonomy to kind of go at their own pace while hitting certain deadlines. But as a side, one of my teacher goals, right, for our whole rating system and stuff, one of my teacher goals is that I also want them to be organized and understand deadlines and all those soft skills that are not necessarily content driven, right? I tend to think that at high school, everything seems to be content driven, right? When you go to elementary, it's more about relationships. It's more about the kid. And somewhere in the middle school, it's a blend. In 7th grade, no one has a clue what's happening. Just all that other stuff that's happening with the kids' lives, right? But then it gets become more content driven. And I think that tends to shy kids away from certain things. So as a math department, as a school, we are really working hard at the relationship side, making sure that our social emotional needs of our kids are met. Because when that's there, that's when you start to see new things. But that whole idea of making it feel different is I give deadlines, and then every week or two, I ask the kids, like, what's your frog? And I try to connect with them in a different way. And if you're not sure what I mean by what's your frog, Mark Twain once said, if you wake up in the morning and eat a frog, everything else after that tastes great. So the frog is that thing that they want to do the least. And this isn't even a computer science thing. I don't even care if they go with my class here. I'm just trying to see, like, what's that thing that's on your mind consuming the most energy from you? Like, and just have them identify it and then work from there. So again, you got to kind of make that class feel different because they have opportunities to do non-content things and that they know that you care and that there's a connection there. And then leverage that hour of code, right? Get those kids involved. I will tell you that the community and tying the community in, your administration is going to love the idea of kids working with other kids. And it helps kind of pitch the idea again. And this quote always kind of hit me, right? Learn from people. People will forget what you said, forget what you did. They'll never forget how you made them feel. And again, that's where that word of mouth is going to come back in. Right? I've had students after these courses be like, I didn't even know that I wanted to do this. I had a girl reach out this year, Taylor, that now she's going to major in computer science. And we've had a couple of them. Actually, we had a scholarship committee and someone was like, dude, like every kid in there wrote about computer science and how that was like an integral part of why they're going into college into that now. And so this one girl, Taylor, wrote, she's like, you like changed my trajectory. Like I was going to do this and I was, just set on this since like I was 2. And then I saw that class as a sophomore and that completely changed everything in my thought process. And now it's going to go to computer science. So again, get those kids in there and let them kind of feel it out for themselves. All right. So I am parched first, but kind of open forum, I guess, here. If there is a question, we have, I guess, a couple minutes here. I know I don't want to spend too much because we've got to transition to other rooms, but are there any questions that maybe I didn't get to address or that you might have now?
We do have one from Paul about how do you structure the classes? It's more self-paced.
Okay.
How do you do that?
So yeah, so in the beginning of the year, I try to keep everyone kind of together. It's definitely self-paced. I will kind of use like the slides from the video. Again, we use CodeHS as a platform. So we use some of the slides and I'll kind of give my 2 cents on it. But I usually do that after the kids, or at least I've opened it up for the kids to watch it. Because there is research that states that when kids kind of try to experience something and tackle something first, they tend to learn more than when we just teach them, right? Like I'm not trying to create mimickers. And I don't know if any of you are math people and have read that Building Thinking Classrooms, right? Like people are mimicking. And like that book changed my world this year. But so I try to avoid that. So I open up a section, then I will go over it after they've had a chance to kind of tackle it, whether it's successful or unsuccessful, put my 2 cents into it, and then do that. As we go throughout the year, we get to the point where I will put out like monthly calendars of like suggested deadlines. And I will say like, oh, we're expecting to have a test here, and we're expecting to have a test here. So I let them then build that autonomy. And ultimately, it's worked out pretty well. Some kids do fall behind, but that's a conversation, right? That's me now connecting with that kid and having the opportunity to kind of say like, what's up? What can we put in place that's going to get you back on track here?
And we did have someone ask if you would be willing to share the survey you gave to your students. They were interested in using the same questions.
Yeah, so I have a couple surveys, so I can share. Is there going to be a formal way afterwards to
Yeah,
relay?
so we actually have the question parking lot for your session, Jesse. And if you want to, if I don't know if you have links that you can just paste in here, everybody who is on this, this will be available after the session, so you can check that out.
Yeah, so surveys are probably something my kids are sick of. So one thing I didn't mention in here is that at the end of each year, I've made a survey that says that kind of like, what is your experiences and your advice to a future AP CSP kid or future kid? And I kind of make a PowerPoint, and that's part of our optional summer work that gets pushed out. If kids are interested, sometimes parents want it. And I do have the kids make their accounts and stuff prior to day one and kind of experience a couple lessons that are easily approachable prior to even meeting. And that's part of that activity. I also, again, going back to that building relationships, I put out surveys at periodic times, probably like every 2 or 3 months, that ask how I'm doing and how this course is working for them, to kind of go back to like what's working, what's not working. But you just got to make sure, if you've never done that, know that kids are truthful. Right? There's going to be a couple things in there that you don't want to hear, but maybe you do need to hear because it's not working for a certain group of kids. I had a kid that was like, it's the same thing every day, dude. Like, change it up. I'm like, got it. Like, I talked to him. I was like, here we go. And like, I made a point then to make sure that it wasn't the same exact feeling thing, because that goes against my whole philosophy of make this feel different than any other course. So yes, I could absolutely share those. You recorded a video of your students with their thoughts. Ooh, we are now. Thank you for that.